Hi, I'm Barrett Klesko, vocalist and guitarist for All Else Fails. What drives me the most as an artist? That's actually a really good question that I don't have a real answer to. It's like an internal energy that forces me to express myself through music. It's the way that I can share myself, I suppose, and my art with the world, and it's a way for me to perform and connect with fans. Where does our band name come from? When we were starting off, we were trying to think of what our band would be, and we were talking about what we wanted it to be musically as well as the band name itself. And I think somebody said the phrase something along the lines of, "Well, if all else fails, we can just play the music we love." And we all laughed, and that was it. It's just really as simple as that. Our new album is called Our new album is called The Instant at Black Lake. It'll be out September 30th. It's an indie release. It's a 4-song EP. We have 2 singles out right now. One is I Defiler, which has a music video for it. You can find that YouTube, wherever. And the other one is Flesh Excess Wealth. We released that as a single first, but we actually do plan to do a video for that a little bit later to follow it. The album itself is it's dark. It's darker than most of our other stuff. It's also a lot heavier. We change a lot. We've changed a lot throughout our career. We've been a band for 15 years now. This is our 10th release. Every album is very different, and this one is no exception to that. This one is a little bit more personal. The other on the other albums, I've always written a lot about social issues. But this one is yeah, it's more personal. This one, I had a really fucked up few years, and so it's about my personal struggles, my I don't want to sound cliche, but my descent into madness, if you will, into mental illness, and I dissociated a lot from reality. I was struggling with a lot, and I was using my coping mechanisms were drinking and weed and psychedelics and all of that. It got to a point, it got bad enough that while we were writing this, I was extremely depressed. I was having a lot of suicidal thoughts, all of the bad shit that can happen to a person. And on the last day, we finished the very last note of the very last piece of the recording, which we'd spent almost 2 full years on working weekly in a studio. And as soon as that was finished, I checked myself into rehab, and which was an amazing experience. But this was about my struggles up to that point. The album title itself is a reference to it's actually a reference to the natural phenomenon of brine pools, and what that is it's at the very bottom of the ocean. There are places where ultra dense water with really high salinity essentially makes underwater lakes, and the idea is that in the deepest, darkest place you can be, there is somewhere further. Our artwork directly reflects that. It's the bending of reality. It's the call of who we are as humans from, essentially our cradle, which is the universe, but it's also being submerged in the deepest parts of ourselves. And I think it reflects, the artwork reflects that very well. Some new albums that I like. I listen to a fair amount of metal, of course, but something I've been listening to a lot of is Wings by Repulsive. Wings is the album. It's came out in 2021. It's essentially a really dark ambient album, and I just find it really fascinating. It's as metal as non-metal can be. Our local music scene, we're from Edmonton, Alberta. It's interesting. It's been an interesting place over the years because we actually have a really incredible music scene. There's just a metric fuck ton of amazing bands in all genres, but metal especially, that come out of this city. And it's been a struggle though since we've started it always seems like it's a little bit worse. There's less venues, there's less support, there's less fans. That seems to be kind of a constant downward, but we struggle on. The venues that do support metal, they stick around and they do the best they can. Post COVID, that's even crazier. And, it's kind of become clear to us that it's fallen on us as artists to try to rebuild that community. So we're starting to do pop-up shows, secret shows, things like that, in non-traditional venues and non-traditional places, with the idea of like resparking a community within our metal scene. Bringing the experience back to the concerts. I kind of feel like post-COVID, people don't. I know I speak for myself, but I speak for what I see around me, and I feel like people don't want to just go to bars anymore. They don't want to just go to some dingy bar and watch a handful of bands and, there's 6 or 7 bands on a bill, because that's what it takes to run a night, and then, go home at 2 in the morning, like all overstimulated from the music. And it's just like, I don't know, I feel like it's just become a little bit much. So we're trying to do something a little bit different now. We're trying to play smaller rooms. We're trying to, like I said, play more unusual places, and we're trying to make it more of an experience. When you go to a show, some time to speak with the bands and hang out, and just do it in interesting places. And I think that alone is enough to really just change the vibe. Our future plans, aside from all of the community building that I just spoke about, we've always done really well overseas. We do fairly well in Canada, but it's always been that our fan base comes from overseas. A lot of it comes from Asia, there's a lot from South America as well. Just, there's huge metal scenes in other parts of the world that we don't, as Canadians, we don't always get exposure to, and having been a part of that a little bit, it's really just caught our hearts as artists, and we want to continue exploring that. So nothing to announce quite yet, but soon enough we'll be announcing some international tour dates. Along with that, we actually have some interesting projects in the go to kind of support this album on the back end. We're shooting a handful of music videos in a kind of meta format that is going to all be stitched together at the end to make a longer movie style. Let's say it's an EP, so it's not going to be a full-length movie, of course, but we want to tell a bigger story. We want to tell it in an interesting way. And so you can kind of keep an eye out for that. We're also planning to do some alternate versions of the album. I don't want to speak too deeply on that quite yet, but we did a lot of programming on this album, a lot of scoring and a lot of compositional work outside of the usual metal stuff, and outside of even just putting keyboards and strings in. We did a lot of soundscape work. We did a lot of just kind of scene building, and we'd like to explore that a little bit, because some of it, the mix, I think, is incredible on the album. Our producer, Bevan Booth, did an amazing job, but I'd like to showcase some of that stuff a little bit more. So I think you could probably expect to see some alternate album versions coming out soon after our release. Why does metal rule? Primarily, I think metal rules because as a type of music, it touches into something primal in us. They say the people sang before they spoke. Music is so ingrained in us as humans. And I think just the raw, ferocity of metal is the thing that rules. It draws out this primal part of ourselves, and I personally, I find it healing. I find it really cathartic to play. And I like, even, from the lyrics and the aggression to the tones, even like just the heavy grinding saturated guitars, I find there's just something about that just speaks to me on a really, really deep level. And that's why metal rules.